All right, I am about to start doing my podcast. So, yeah, let's get that going. Hey, everybody. All right, so today's podcast is about to start. All right, hey there. This is Michelle Spiva, and thank you for joining me on the flip. And today we're going to actually be doing a little bit of foundational wisdom strength training, where kind of like a reminder, but also about helping us to find our legs now that we're in this pandemic for what seems to be the long haul. So today we're going to be talking about how to double down on you or me, or we. And the first thing I want to do is I want to talk about what doubling down means because thank you, I have global listeners, global followers. And so the way I'm describing doubling down is it's strengthening of one's commitment to a particular strategy or a course of action. And it usually can be one that's touted as being risky. But for today's purposes, I want to say that you can always bet on yourself and sway the odds for you to win because it's you. All right. So when we talk about doubling down, we're talking about going all in, taking that leap of faith to make sure that we do what we can and what we must to get what we want and what we need. And it can be hard to do that, especially when everything around you is giving you negative feedback that it's not going to work. And it gets to be kind of hard. And one of the things that I want to say is that if you can find some kind of way to identify that one thing that you can go all in on, that's the thing that I would say migrate to and start to work on. Now, a few podcasts ago, I did a podcast talking about taking a full swing, and it was kind of a little bit like this of going in full tilt. And I didn't feel like I did it enough service because, you can't say everything in 30 minutes, but I said what I could, and I wanted to say some more today. And that is whenever you are facing an unknown, whenever you're facing uncertainty, whenever you are facing something that you don't have a reference point, it's that time to double down. Now, there was this book that I recommended a little while ago about emotions and how to find what you feel in what you're going through. And I went back and I kind of looked at my notes on it, and I came away with something a little bit different. And that is that yes, we are trained to try to predict what we're going to feel in a situation. But when you don't seem to have a reference point, I mean, when's the last time you were in a uh, pandemic that usually comes around every 100 years? Exactly. So most of us we're still just trying to figure this stuff out. And no one that's under 100 years old can really say, well, this is what happened in the Spanish flu. You can't really say that. So we're all just trying to figure it out. But the thing I can say about it is, with regards to our emotions, is that you can usually tell what type of emotions were foundationally planted in you in times like this. And the sad truth for a lot of people in Western cultures is that when we were growing up, the only real emotions that were ever expressed to us and through us, or that were even permitted, were extreme emotions of anger or fear. And so a lot of people, including me, we tend to not like to let our emotions show because it feels like that's a betrayal of our strong defenses, of our ability to be able to be strong and steadfast and stoic and all of these things that we think are going to help us get through the hard times when it's counterintuitive, but these are the times that you get to and you need to start activating your ability to express, your ability to sort through your emotions. Because let's face it, you kind of get a pass because it's not like you're having a bad day. Everybody is going through the same thing. So it's not like you can, anyone can say, tough it up, buttercup. No, they've got to go through their own stuff. And so this is kind of like a perfect storm and a perfect way for us to be able to do a lot of work on ourselves so that when we get out of this, because we will, when we get out of this, we can emerge better for it. And I said it the other day, and I'll say it today. In every loss, or what we can think of as a loss or a setback, in every loss, if you decide, there is a lesson for you. And so, one of the wisdom smacks that I want to say today, with regards to doubling down on you, on me, on we, is that this is your time to really get into facing what emotions feel like for you. Because this is another thing I want to say about anger and fear. When we look at the 7 traditional negative emotions that can come out, anger, fear, sadness, jealousy, regret, guilt, um, those kinds, we find that at the top is anger. Anger seems to be the coverall. It's the easiest one to emote, it's the easiest one to latch onto because it is the one that is the most forceful in pushing people away and being a defense on your behalf. And so though people say or feel like the only emotions that they're familiar with are anger or maybe even fear, what they're realizing is that those were the safest emotions for them to experience or for their family members or their environment to express in hard times. But there's something about emotions. Once you start expressing anger and fear, then once they get dissipated, you start to uncover the emotions that are underneath. Those ones that are the root that will continue to keep you down, to continue to keep you bound up where you can't move and you don't know why. Yeah. So that's another reason why we want to double down. We want to put all our money on that bet. Even though it might sound risky, when the bet is you can turn the odds into your favor. So that's one of the things that I want to say about that. The next one is to go all in. And I said, take the leap, take a full swing at the bat and going all in. Now, going all in on this doubling down, it looks a little different because when you start to go all in on yourself, especially in tumultuous times, it requires a strength that you may or may not have. And you won't even know until you have committed to going all in. And let me just tell you, those those character traits, or not even traits, but those aspects that it's going to take for you to go all in are going to require, yeah, the stuff we always talk about, like being consistent and being diligent and all of that. But on top of that, it's going to require vulnerability. Mhm. And see, vulnerability, that is something that will hike you right back in to, you guessed it, anger and fear. And one thing I will say about anger and fear from my therapy days is when we wanted to work with people to get past or express that out. That's the very thing you do. With anger and fear emotions, you express them out. That's why a lot of people say, go take a walk, go for a drive, go for a run, uh, do something to get it out of your body because they can get trapped inside of you and you can be walking around with a lot of anger and not know it up here, but your body does. And so being able to go all in requires that you express out a lot of that anger that you may or may not know exist. The next thing is with this going all in and dealing with, yes, your consistency and your diligence, but also your vulnerability, is that with vulnerability, it can be tricky because it's something that we're not traditionally taught to embrace, especially when it comes to us. Vulnerability is still all about you. You don't be vulnerable for someone else. You don't be vulnerable so that people will say, "What a hero." You don't do that. And actually, today, I learned a term. Let me tell y'all what this term is. I mean, I guess it's a way of saying what we're saying, but it's like a quicker way, and it's called virtue, virtue sharing, and it's where you pretend. Well, I don't know if it's necessarily where you pretend, but it's where you show how good you are, how virtuous you are, when you might not be as virtuous as you pretend to be. And so it's called virtue signaling, not stancing, but it's called virtue signaling. And what it means is it says it's that. Now I got to read my notes. It's the action or practice of publicly expressing opinions or sentiments intended to demonstrate one's good character or the moral correctness of one's position on a particular issue. And doubling down, being able to be that person that you need to be when everybody is watching. We talked about Dave Chappelle's famous quote about that, requires vulnerability. But be aware that if you have to do this in the midst of people, you could be accused of virtue signaling. And because of that, it makes it hard for us to be vulnerable. And Brene Brown, who has done a lot of work on the topic, has much to say about it. And I'm going to just refer you guys to her podcast as well as her many books. And she is almost single-handedly leading a lot of us through these times of understanding what it means to be vulnerable. But what I will say is this, is that with vulnerability, it has certain requirements. And those requirements are that you don't lie to yourself and you get clear about who you are and what you want. Because to be vulnerable means almost simultaneously that you are required to be authentic. And to be authentic is really scary for some people because you spend so much time building up this perfect persona, this perfect being that exists in a perfect world where you never let anyone see you sweat. You never let anyone see you struggle or even learn. Yeah. And so it makes it hard. But to be able to truly double down, sorry, you guys, I'm touching my face. Let me do this because, yeah, allergies are real. But to be able to double down also means that you get to this point where enough is enough and you're willing to do what it takes to be who it is you need to be. Now, let me go back a little bit and talk about why are we talking about doubling down on a wisdom infusion podcast. The reason why is because right now the seams and the cracks are starting to show for a lot of people. The inability to get out of the house, to be around other people. Just over half of the world's population are considered extroverts. And extroverts derive their vitality and their energy from being able to move freely socially, as well as interacting with people, and they receive their energy from that. And so this is torture for, well, a little over half of society. And when you're told that you have to sequester, and you're used to being able to socialize. You're used to being able to have human interaction that involves a hug or touch or closeness or, a connection in person. It makes it really hard. And so it makes it also doubly hard when you have to maintain your mental health and maintain your ability to continue to grow and move forward. And so to double down also means that you have to fight for keeping your ground and not losing ground. And when I say not losing ground, I mean not losing all of the things that you've worked for to become a human who is able to matriculate and socialize and interact with people where it's not all about you. It's not all about selfishness. And so doubling down, going all in the ways of wisdom also requires us to take an inventory of who we are when we're by ourselves, who we are when no one's looking, who we are when there's no need to show up with a party face on. And that is also the time and the person that we need to deal with. Um, like I said, you can count this as a blessing or a curse or whatever. But what I would like for you to do is to make sure that whatever you count it as an opportunity and a boon for you to catapult and grow stronger in who you are. Because think of when is the last time, and I know I might be excluding some people who are still having to go out there and work. You're still doing essential work, if not even more, because even more people are depending on you, whether you are carrying the mail or serving food or working at the hospitals or whatever it may be. My heart goes out to you. But in the meantime and in between time, when 75% of the population, at least in the US, are supposed to be sequestering, I want you to not squander this time because this is a great gift. I mean, this is an absolute beauty of a gift. Think about it. 60 to 90 days that we know of, what you could do. When you look at a quarter of a year to be able to back down from constantly running, on full cylinders and being able to back down and start to do some work on you, do you realize your whole world could change? And speaking of world changing, doubling down on you is going to help you. Now, here is really kind of like the big wisdom smack, the aha that I'm kind of receiving right now and that I wanted to share with you. And that is, I've already said, we can't unring this bell. We can't go back. The world is not going to be the way it was before this pandemic. And then I thought about how my grandparents, who were the children of the Depression, how they were changed after the depression. Now they were children when the depression hit, but it said it changed the nation of how everyone interacted and what they thought of their contributions to their societies and to themselves and their families. And like I said, no one has really ever gone through a pandemic before, but I will say this based on how people behaved after the Great Depression of 1929 in the US. And then now, uh, because the very fabric and foundations of our economies and how we interact with each other has changed, we are they're projecting that social distancing will have long-term effects. Now, I'm not saying that I have numbers on this yet because they're still gathering them. Got to give them time to gather them. But think about how just dating will change. People used to say practice safe sex. Now you got to practice self distancing until both of you are proven to not be infectious. Would you have ever thought that there might be a possibility that when you're meeting up, before you can get close, you both have to take your temperature? You might have to wear face mask to date. It's different. And I'm not going to even talk about economically what's going to happen. I listened to someone today, and I forgot to get her name to give her proper attribution, but she studies the economy and trends in finances, and she said something that was real important for why we need to double down on us, and that is, as she said, that too many governments, contemporary governments, have made it where they have realized something about people, and that is that people want to feel prosperous, whether they are or not. People want to feel wealthy. People want to feel rich, whether they are or not. And so, because of that, they, politics and business and all of that, always appealed to people's want for that. And guess what? When I went back and looked at the what was happening right before the fall in the Great Depression in 1929, just before, everyone was saying that this is the most prosperous this nation had ever been, and how it was everybody should be spending and enjoying and reveling in their wealth. And it was the same thing. I was like, oh my gosh. And then boom, it happens. And some people don't make it. Of course, we know that there were a lot of people who just could not face a world without having their things about them. That feeling of wealth that this lady just referred to, and on and on. There were soup lines, and we already have soup lines right now. right now. And this is not fear mongering or anything. These are just stating observations and facts that are happening right now. And so it's reminiscent of what happened before. But on the other side of it, the 1930s, we saw huge expansions in our consciousness of technologies and inventions and being able to expand what we were able to do and the ways we were able to make our lives more effective and efficient. I mean, they were efficiency experts who just a whole new um, profession came out. Efficiency experts after the Great Depression, and so think about all of the things that are about to emerge that wouldn't we first of all wouldn't have thought we had a need for, and second of all would never probably have emerged if we had not had this pandemic of what's getting ready to come. Now, if you're going to be able to take advantage of this, it's time for you to take advantage of this by doubling down. So, what does doubling down look like? Because, we got to be practical as well. So, now I've told you a little bit of the what. Let's talk about some of the how now. So, with doubling down, one of the things that I want you to do is I want you to start learning how to dial back down your aspirations from hero down to human. What does that mean? That means that you need to give yourself time to go and learn how to stick to one thing at one time to gain a skill from it and an education of it. Because as you become better at learning to focus in and how to stick to one thing, how to show up for it every day, and how to take the grand leaps of being the hero or the heroine away from it and learning how to be the human who is proficient in it. That's going to help you to be stronger, to emerge out of this and be prepared for whatever our new world brings us. The next thing is that, and I heard this from the creator, owner of ConvertKit. And he said this. He said, and it rang for me because he's a writer and I'm a writer. And he was talking about it as when you hit a writing block. But I'm just talking about it for when you hit those blocks and those snags and those, I don't want to do this kind of days. And this is what he said. He said, when you hit a block, lower your standards and keep going. And I thought that was powerful because when we're trying to be so heroic, so perfect, and we're trying to uh, reach for the rafters and do things in a great way, so that everybody will be like, you're so great. We're so busy trying to be the hero that we forget that we're first human. And to be human is to learn how to do something. One of the parts that I have to remind myself when I am putting together training curriculums and the like is that I have to make sure that I balance not too much of the what's and not too much of the hows, but I have to balance putting in all the components that my students will need to be able to go and replicate what I'm trying to teach them when I'm not there. And so that means that I have to go back down to, and here we go, andrological. That is the I'm sorry, I said andrological, but I mean pedagogical. Think about pediatrician, the child. We have to go back to the foundations. And so when we're trying to learn something, or even if I'm trying to teach something, I have to figure out what are the foundational elements of it, because I can't go to theory. I can't just say something what and then expect someone to extrapolate the what into how to go do it. I have to lay down the foundation. Then I have to give education about it. Then I have to give um, practical ways of doing it. And then I have to show it, demonstrate it, or take them through the exercise of it, give them homework, all of these types of things. And so during this time of doubling down, this is your opportunity to be able to do the same thing for yourself. So, say for instance, you always wanted to do X, Y, or Z. There are two great universities for free that you can, if as long as you have an internet, you can get access to them. And you know what they are? And they unfortunately happen to be owned by the same company, Google and YouTube. Oh, yes. If you know how to get your Google on and your YouTube, I'm going to say 90% of what you want to learn, at least if you're getting from the beginner to the intermediate, it'll get you there. Oh, yeah, it'll get you there. And so, because of that, this is the time for you to double down. That time that you're spending commuting to and from work that you're not doing right now, take that 3 to 4 hours, and I'm including time to get ready for work. Take that 3 to 4 hours and divide it. Divide it into, maybe you study for one thing, at one time, and the other part, you do your exercise and you move your body. And think what will happen 4 to 6 weeks from now when you emerge. You will have gotten a new skill with education and foundational understanding of it. You could possibly change the entire direct trajectory of not only your life, but everyone's life you come in contact with. Not just your family and friends, but those people who will benefit and be the benefactors of what it is you do because you took this time to double down on you. Let me check my notes some more because I want to make sure I get this all in here. Yes, going back to what Dr. Brene Brown says about vulnerability and honesty. She says, clear is kind. And part of what she means in that is once you get clear about something, it's your duty to articulate it in a clear way before it goes too bad. And you might think of that as having to have a conversation with someone, in a relationship kind of situation. But for today, because this is about you, this is about me, be clear with yourself. Be kind, but be clear. Go back. It's okay. If you have squandered 2 weeks of aimlessly trying to figure out what you're doing each day because of maybe feeling like you're in free fall with no direction and no catcher's net, it's okay. But today you got time. Today you can start. You can start by doubling down on yourself, by getting to the point where you are willing to take the leap to show up for yourself every day, to go all in, where you're like, this is the perfect storm. This is the perfect time where you're able to take a full swing at the bat to double down on getting one thing that you can commit to either learn it or advance your skills and knowledge of it so that you can be ready for when you emerge out, because our the world as we know it is not going to be the same, and there are going to be new technologies, new requirements, new things that we didn't realize we were going to need because we couldn't have thought of our world going this way. Another thing I'm going to say before, because my time is almost up, y'all. Another thing I'm going to say is that when you are going about what you're doing, make sure that if you feel frustration, if you feel like every time you sit down to do something, you want to get up and go do something else, guess what that is? Yeah, it's a form of anger. Remember when we at the top of the podcast when we were talking about dealing with emotions? Anger, a lot of people don't realize they have it. So it can come out in frustration, which is a more logical format of anger. And if you're feeling frustrated, it's because you don't like feeling out of control. You don't like feeling like you don't know what you're doing. But guess what? It only lasts for a little while. Josh Kaufman, in his book of learning anything in 20 and learning anything in 20 weeks or the like, you can be able to get past frustration when you practice. And as you practice, if you take a little bit about what Anders Ericsson said when he talked about the exceptional athlete, focus on getting deliberate practice where you deliberately try to make sure that you do your practice in the most correct way, and possibly seeking out feedback from others, to get some feedback. Am I onto something? Is this right? Am I doing this correctly? And if you can't find people, guess what? Go back to YouTube, find out if there are people on YouTube or Google who you can emulate and see if they're doing something right. But deal with the emotions that are going to come. Deal with all of those things that would cause you to want to shrink away and not invest this time in yourself. Because I'm telling you now, this is a blessing. Take advantage of this. Double down on you while you can. So, yep, guess what? My time is up. I want to thank you for yours. This has been Michelle Spiva, your practical priestess of wisdom, with another podcast of Wisdom Smack. And so, guess what? This is a daily podcast, and I'm going to see you tomorrow. Bye. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining me. I do appreciate it. It's been great. And like I said, I was trying something new to see if I could go on and do this while I'm making the recording. So if it works, I'll see you again soon. Bye.